Yes.
Great. So good evening, everyone. I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge, and I want to thank everyone for coming to this affordable housing webinar. Probably could have come up with a little fancier title, but thanks everyone for coming. We have around 23 municipal officials, municipal leaders that have an interest in building affordable housing. And for those that are not as familiar with my advocacy, going back to when I was a legal aid attorney for Merrimack Valley Legal Services, then in the legislature serving as the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Housing. Been a strong advocate both of increasing state funding for affordable housing, promoting housing production and zoning reform changes, being involved locally with groups like Habitat for Humanity, and really just trying to have a productive dialogue with the 14 communities I represent in Metro West about how do we build affordable housing. And I recognize that term is often used a little generally is truly affordable housing. So making sure that those that are less well off, perhaps really facing some economic struggles, are able to live in our communities, and in not just senior housing or housing for people with disabilities, but family housing as well. So something really important to me. And just for those that are checked in as attendees, this is being recorded, so we want to make this available for those that couldn't attend tonight. And really the idea was to bring together 4 experts that are all active in some way of building affordable housing or advocating for policy changes that lead to affordable housing. Affordable housing in Metro West, obviously faces challenges just like every other part of the state, in some ways, more unique. And I'm certainly seeing, which is really encouraging, more support for building affordable housing, which I'm really grateful for. And, just looking out at a lot of the municipal officials here, I know that you're part of that solution. So appreciate you doing that. What we're going to do is, and I'm going to introduce all together the 4 presenters who will present in that order. And then I'll serve as the moderator, and if people have questions, they can put it in the chat. Just ask for attendees, and I think you've been muted, but just if you could stay muted during the presentation. So once again, thanks so much for coming, and going to begin the introductions. So the first person, first leader is Emilio Dorcely, CEO of Urban Edge, where he oversees the organization's operations, in family, wealth building, resident services, community engagement, as well as affordable housing pipeline of more than 300 homes. Next presenter is Abby Curvey. She's been with CHAPA as a policy associate for over 3 years, works with CHAPA's policy team to further the affordable housing priorities through various committees, coalitions, and advocacy. We have Steve Jonkus, who is the Director of Real Estate Development for Commonwealth Common Ground Development Corporation, a nonprofit affordable housing development subsidiary of Common Community Teamwork, CTI, out of Lowell. And Carolyn Reed, who serves as the Director of Habitat for Humanity, North Central Massachusetts, an independently affiliated organization of Habitat for Humanity International, serving local communities, including this region, and with the mission of bringing people together to build homes, communities, and hope. So thank you all for being willing to present. I'm so grateful for you presenting tonight and for your great work in your organizations. And now we will start the presentations with Emilio. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Senator. I just want to thank you and your staff for bringing all of us together for this, what I hope is going to be a great webinar, and people will hopefully have a lot of questions. What I'd like to do is to take a minute and share my screen. And what I'd like to do is to really talk a little bit about the work that we do at Urban Edge. Can everyone see my screen? Great. So one of the things that may be a little bit different for many of you is that Urban Edge is located probably outside of the majority of your focus areas as far as geographically. Urban Edge is located in Boston, and our primary service area, and let me just move to the slide so those of you, so you can get a sense of where we work before I get into the type of work and the specific project that I wanted to talk about. So we're located in Boston. Our offices are in Roxbury, and it's actually a few blocks away from the Jackson T station. And we have properties that are located in a number of different neighborhoods. Roxbury is the heart of where most of our properties are, but we also have properties in Jamaica Plain, Dorchester, Mattapan. And so we tend to focus primarily on family housing. And we've done both home ownership and rental. I know the senator talked a little bit about the organization when he did the introduction, but as you can see, you know, we do build affordable housing, and we do a lot of support services for the residents who live in the affordable housing, and also engage in the broader community in providing services and focus on providing wealth building activities primarily through home ownership education and counseling. We currently have about 1,400 units that we've built over the years that are part of a portfolio that we manage. And we help, gosh, you know, well over 2,000 residents throughout the community every year, both who are residents and who are not residents of our properties. You know, we've got a fairly diverse staff of 30. And then our board, which is made up of both community members, but also residents who live in our buildings. We have an operating budget of a little over $5 million, and our revenue is made up equally between fees that we gain from real estate development. Another third is from our operations of our portfolio, and another third is from grants, either government or private foundation or individual giving. Mostly in the residents that we own, I would say about over 90% are people of color, primarily Black and Latino. And the majority of the 1,400 units that we do are primarily the low to moderate income range. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to my example. So the project I wanted to talk about today is actually a project that we're currently working on. We're calling it 1599 Columbus. As you can tell, very creative, because that's actually the address of where it's located, which is on Columbus Avenue, you know, in Jackson Square. And one of the reasons that we picked this project, because it's a great example of an actual project that we've been working on for the past 5 or 6 years, and we have received funding, but we also have not closed on the construction loan yet, and we hope to do that over the next 7 or 8 months. But what's interesting, just to give you a quick overview, the 1599 Columbus project, it, you know, will be 65 new construction rental homes, primarily for families, and they will be 100% affordable. And what I mean by that is that we're looking at the AMI range of 60% area median income and below, and I'll provide a little bit more detail about that later on for those of you who aren't familiar with that. A few of the interesting aspects of this project is that it's going to be a passive house standard for green. And for those of you who may not be familiar with that, as many people already know, the cost of energy and the cost of heating and cooling homes is one of the largest costs that is impacting not only affordable housing, but housing in general. And Urban Edge for the past couple of years has really sought to try to make sure that all of the buildings that we build are energy efficient, and passive house is one of the newer levels of efficiency, efficiency that people are using. And generally, it's been estimated to save about 20–25% of energy costs throughout the lifetime of the building. And really what it is having higher grade windows that both retain the heat inside and keep the cold outside, and then has a much higher level of, I guess the easiest way to say it would be the ability to make sure that the heat, as I said, stays within the building, and then when it's cold outside, the cold stays outside the building. And one of the great things about the passive house is that although it's a fairly new line of energy efficiency, it's really catching on. And in many cities, a lot of cities and states are actually adopting some of the guidelines of passive house and making that the minimum requirements for building. And so we're hoping that, over the next couple of years, passive house will continue to gain momentum. The other aspect of this project that's really interesting, and this is similar to most of the projects that we do, we make sure that there's community engagement, and that the projects that we do, that we engage with the community and get their input to help us determine what types of project that we build. The total development cost for the 1599 is $36 million for the total development cost, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later as far as what makes up a total development cost. One of the things that I did want to share is that also what makes this project unique is that in the previous slide, you saw the mock-up of what the finished building is going to look like. I wanted to maybe spend 1 minute to show how, in order for us to be able to get a lot large enough to make 62 units, it really required about 5 years worth of work, where we had to assemble different parcels over time. For example, if you look at the slide, in 2016, we were able to buy the first parcel from a private owner. And then 2 years later, we were able to buy a second parcel in 2018. And then there was a smaller parcel that we were awarded through the city of Boston. And then in 2020, we finally were able to get ownership of the last parcel. The reason this is interesting is because sometimes, especially in a city like Boston, but probably in many other places, land may not be readily available. And in order to be able to develop a project, it may require patience and long-term planning in order to be able to piece together the land in order to be able to create a project of scale or size that you're looking for. The next slide is, I wanted to just, again, as I said, it's really important that for us at least, and I believe for many other colleagues in affordable housing work, that we work very closely with the community members to engage them in conversation even before we start a project, as I said. And this is just an example of some news clippings from when we did our community outreach and discussion when we were in the feasibility process of our project. The other piece that I wanted to bring out is that the biggest thing that came out of the community process for us was that people were very much interested in making sure that we had housing that was closely aligned to a significant amount of the income levels that existed in the current neighborhood. That's how we got the 60% AMI. It's a little bit small type, but if you can look, you'll see what we showed in this slide was that in the chart that you see about 40% of the residents are between 30 to 60% AMI, which is the majority of the residents in our target area. And so we made sure that when feasibly, financially feasible, we try our best to make sure that we target that. And this is not to say that other income ranges are not important, because they are, but it's important to try to find the best balance to meet the needs of the particular community that you're working with and for. So as I mentioned earlier, the project is 65 rental units. And as I said, it's 100% affordable. but I wanted to make sure I broke that down so people got a sense of what that means. 22 of the units are at 30% AMI, 43% of the units are at 60% AMI, and we did a mix of 1 to 3 bedrooms. And as I said, the majority of the units are really targeting families, but we also know that there are other individuals, especially single individuals, who also need affordable housing. So we try our best to do a mix. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the AMI, even though I have a slide that talks about it in a little bit more detail, but just to give people a sense of what these AMIs look like and what they mean. But the AMI is really just area medium income. It's really the way that we're able to, when we apply for funding, and we're able to target specific income ranges. And just for an example, when we talk about 30% AMI, we're really talking about a family of 2 that makes somewhere in the range of $35,000 to $40,000. Just to give you a sense. And when we're talking about 60% AMI, we're really talking about a family of 2 that makes less than $65,000 or $70,000. And that just gives you a sense of, when you hear the AMIs, what they actually mean. Earlier, I talked about what the total development budget was. And what I wanted to do was spend a few minutes just going through what actually makes up the total development costs. As you can see on the left side of your screen, it has the categories, which is acquisition, construction, soft costs, reserves, and developer fees. The acquisition is really what I talked about before, when we had to do the assemblage, where we were taking multiple sites and putting them together, and where we had to purchase that. Some of that we were able to get through loans, where we got acquisition loans. The construction is really defined as the cost to build the building. And this is ordinarily the largest part of the total development cost. As you can see, for this particular project, it's almost $24 million. The soft costs are really defined as the cost that we pay to the professionals, the architects, the engineers, the attorneys, other types of professionals that we utilize throughout the development process that help us to figure out what we're building, how we're building it, and what we need to make sure that we understand in order to make sure we can build the property correctly. And then there's reserves. These are things that are usually required as part of the development process as a way of ensuring long-term sustainability of the building after it's built, where a certain amount of money is put aside to make sure that if there are unforeseen things that happen, either at the completion or during construction, that there's some money put aside to help make sure that those things can be actually supported. Then there's what's called the developer fee. That is the fee that the organization that is the primary developer for the project earns. Is usually a percentage of the total development cost. And for sometimes people will say, well, gosh, you're making over $3 million for developing affordable housing, but then you have to think about the 5 years of staff time and all of the risks that were taken, because in order to even get to a construction closing, usually an organization has to either borrow or put up at least several $100,000 and sometimes even more. And then for us, the way we spend our developer fees, that it goes back into investing in the community, into building more affordable housing, and also helps to support the other services that I talked about earlier, like supporting the wealth building through home ownership, education, and in the resident services and the community engagement work that we do. Now, how did we actually get the money, and where did we get the money from? As you can see, when it comes to affordable housing, it really requires being able to access multiple types of funding sources in order to make any type of deal work. For us, for this particular project, we really had to find, and this doesn't include the acquisition dollars, we really had to find 5 different sources. We were able to get loans from the city of Boston. We were able to get tax credits, both federal and state, and then additional state funding vis-a-vis a loan, and then finally a conventional mortgage. As you can see from, from the chart, the largest piece to this is the federal tax credits, which generally for projects of this size tends to be one of the major funding sources that allow affordable housing to be developed. But it's very rare that you're going to have a project that doesn't also need other funding, especially a conventional mortgage. As you can see, the conventional mortgage for this project is about $7.5 million. And really, the conventional mortgage is no different than what happens when someone is buying a single family home. It's going to be a 30-year mortgage. And even from the beginning of, before you even begin to build anything, you already have figured out how you're going to carry that debt service from day one all the way into the end of the project or the end of the mortgage, which is 30 years later. So one of the things I wanted to mention was timeline. I started by saying that this project is, started in 2016. It really actually started probably a little earlier, because 2016 is when we actually did the first site acquisition and got the first acquisition loan. But this gives you an idea that by the time we complete the project, which would be hopefully 2024, which is when we believe the project will be completed, that literally would have been 8 years. So generally speaking, when you're doing affordable housing, it's not something that happens overnight. It does take a lot of planning. It takes a lot of time, and a lot of patience, and a lot of what they call capital that can take its time, because it's not something that you're going to build overnight, and it does require the patience, but the payoff is amazing, because as many of you probably know, affordable housing is a fundamental part and a very important building block that allows people to have, to feel safe, to be able to focus on their education, focus on their careers, and to be able to hopefully start a family and support a family. So with that, I wanted to say thank you, because I know I may have gone a few minutes over, but we have a number of other great panelists, and I want to turn it over to them. Thank you. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Emilio. After Emilio, and thank you for the presentation, we have Abi Curve.
Can everybody see my screen? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. This is Abi Kurve from CHAPA. I just wanted to give a quick, for those of you who don't know, CHAPA is Citizens Housing and Planning Association. We are a policy and advocacy organization who try to put forward affordable housing production, preservation, planning, and prosperity in terms of making sure that residents of Massachusetts have a safe place to call home. So to give an overview of the zoning reforms that just went through the Economic Development Bill early January of 2021, that is a huge change to our zoning act, and it has been a while since the state's zoning law has been changed, or rather upgraded. And so we are thankful to the legislature for taking this forward and taking this on, because zoning changes are like so imbibed into every community, and it's not easy to get something like this passed. But having said that, these changes provide a very helpful tool for so many of the communities to actually address the housing supply shortages and start building. As Emilio also pointed out, that the more number of the time equals money in affordable housing production. And so reducing some of the zoning barriers or some of the things that were restricting in terms of zoning requirements and permits, reducing those barriers can really help. We hope that it helps spur the affordable housing production and housing production in general in many of the communities that really need that housing. So with that, I'm just going to quickly go over some of the provisions of the housing choice and the zoning reforms that were there in the economic development bill. The objective was to make it easier to approve smart growth zoning. So the way we tried to move this forward and incorporate language was to ensure that we are taking into account housing, transportation, and those factors into account as we try to look at more housing production and ensure that we have smart growth in our districts. And we are very thoughtful about where we are planning districts which can allow more housing or more multifamily housing. So this is, as I said, a change to state's zoning law, Chapter 40A. So the housing choice basically allows some bylaws and zoning ordinances to be passed by a simple majority vote instead of a 2/3 majority. Many communities were not able to approve certain housing developments, even if they had 7-4 votes, but now they can because of the super majority to simple majority change. It applies to all cities and towns in Massachusetts except Boston, 350 cities and towns, and the law is currently in effect as of now. So it basically comprises of three major changes in three categories. One is elimination of the, as I said, elimination of the supermajority and bringing it down to simple majority, the multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA municipalities, and other changes to streamline permitting and abutter appeals reforms. So for housing choice, the zoning allowing for certain kind of by right changes with simple majority, some of them being by right family housing or mixed use development that includes residential in an eligible location. I will quickly go over the definition of what is an eligible location by this law. By right accessory dwelling units, where whether within a home or in a detached structure on the same lot, or by right open space residential development. Zoning also, the housing choice also allows for zoning of certain kinds of housing developments by special permit with a simple majority vote that would include multifamily housing or mixed use development in an eligible location of smart growth, and increase to the an increase in the number of units on the property if the special permit is approved, and accessory dwelling units in a detached structure on the same lot. It also allows for reduction in the amount of parking required for a residential mixed-use development. Reduction in parking also would genuinely help get more number of units in a development and thus increasing the density and allowing for more families to access housing in that community. So this is just the technical definition of eligible locations. A lot of the way this law is worded, a lot of details lie in the definitions of these words. We are expecting DHCD to issue a lot of guidance on some of these things, but there is already some guidance issued on some of the provisions, but the major one is still to be out, and DHCD is taking a lot of public input before they do issue that guidance. So this is just one of the crucial definitions on eligible locations, defined as areas by the virtue of their infrastructure, transportation access. So this is basically taking into account the smart growth, transportation, and other factors into account as we are developing housing or developing a district that can, developing a zone that can have more housing. Coming to the MBTA communities, this is a new section added to the Zoning Act and establishes a new requirement for all MBTA communities. There are 175 cities and towns that are included as MBTA communities, and I'll have the list shortly, that have to have a zoning district of reasonable size that allows for multifamily residential development by right. And so what counts as a reasonable size is, again, it's it's not clear in this law, but we expect the DHCD to issue guidance on what counts as reasonable size. The district must be located within half a mile of a transit station if one is present, but communities without transit stations are also required to have a multifamily district. And the statute requires the district to have a minimum density of 15 units per acre. And there are some limitations subject to few other limitations by Wetlands Protection Act and statewide wastewater regulations. It should be located within half a mile from a, as I said, commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or bus station, if applicable, and should not be age restricted and should be suitable for families with children. Those are, again, that is coming from the need for housing for families and making sure that everybody, all types of groups have housing in the community, and we are not just building one type of housing. So the municipality, if the municipality does not comply with this requirement, they will be ineligible to receive funds from Housing Choice Initiative, local capital project funds, and Mass Works Infrastructure Development Program. Although as of now, this goes into effect from 2022. As of now, all municipalities should be eligible for these 3 grants. And so this is just a quick map of the MBTA communities. And this is the whole, and I'm happy to share this presentation so that everybody has this information. But these are basically this is the list of municipalities that are subject to the MBTA multifamily zoning by right requirement. And I've just highlighted a few that are in Senator Eldridge's district. And maybe I'm missing a couple here, but these are some of the communities that will come under the multifamily zoning. So as I said, DHCD has to issue guidelines on many of the sections. Compliance criteria will be developed as DHCD is consulting with many stakeholders. The criteria is yet to be established. All communities, as I said, will be eligible to apply for the 3 programs in the upcoming 2021 grant cycle, but from 2022, they will have to comply with the given laws in order to be eligible for those grants. There are also some other changes to the zoning law, zoning protests in a municipality with a council of less than 25 members. And so this is just a quick map of the MBTA communities. And this is the whole, and I'm happy to share this presentation so that everybody has this information. But these are basically this is the list of municipalities that are subject to the MBTA multifamily zoning by right requirement. And I've just highlighted a few that are in Senator Eldridge's district. And maybe I'm missing a couple here, but these are some of the communities that will come under the multifamily zoning. So as I said, DHCD has to issue guidelines on many of the sections. Compliance criteria will be developed as DHCD is consulting with many stakeholders. The criteria is yet to be established. All communities, as I said, will be eligible to apply for the 3 programs in the upcoming 2021 grant cycle, but from 2022, they will have to comply with the given laws in order to be eligible for those grants. There are also some other changes to the zoning law, zoning protests in a municipality with a council of less than 25 members. If the owners of more than half of the land impacted by zoning amendment or abutting neighbors within 300 feet of the affected land protest a zoning change, the required vote to adopt an ordinance will be by 2/3 majority. And this change applies to the protest of any zoning amendment, not just housing choice provisions. And we anticipate that DHCD will help clarify this provision through more guidance. There's also a butter appeals reform, which is a part of this, where the judge has the option to require a party appealing a decision to approve a special permit, variance, or site plan to post up to a $50,000 bond to secure payment of costs if the court finds that the harm to the defendant or to the public interest resulting from delays caused by the appeals outweighs the financial burden of the surety or cash bonds on the plaintiffs. And so this is also this was a major barrier that was there in terms of few amount of residents opposing major development. And so this sort of gets to that level where there is some limit on the meritless lawsuits or frivolous lawsuits that are filed. There are also certain other special permit vote changes that voting requirement for certain special permits, reducing it from a super majority to simple majority for multifamily within half a mile of transit stops, with at least 10% of affordable housing, with less than 80% of AMI, also mixed use developments in centers of commercial activity with at least 10% of affordable housing with 80% AMI, and reduction of certain parking ratio requirements. So there's a lot that is packed into this law, and a lot of it will also depend on what guidance DHCD puts out. But I would also say that a lot also depends on how communities really make use of these laws and these tools to make sure that they are planning and building that housing in their communities. And so we are very excited about this and are really looking forward to the implementation of this with all of your help and support. And so these are some resources. As I said, I'm happy to share the presentation, which has links to all of these resources. I can also put them up in the chat. And that is about my presentation. I would love to pass it on to the next speaker.
So, Senator, I think I'm next. I don't have a slideshow to share with you, but I would like to say a little bit about the background of the organizations that I work with. Community Teamwork, Inc. is the community action program agency for Greater Lowell. And Common Ground Development Corporation is a subsidiary that was formed by CTI. And its mission is to work with communities to help them implement their vision of affordable housing. CTI as a CAP agency is involved in a number of anti-poverty efforts, everything from housing, of course, to food stability through WIC and SNAP programs, early childhood education and childcare, fuel assistance, and other programs that are designed to help extremely low and low income persons achieve economic independence and sustainability. They put out a community needs assessment every year, and this year, among other subjects, it also touches upon housing. And the information that they've provided indicates how housing is a key element in determining whether or not a family is living in poverty. One aspect of this analysis included a focus group with 19 persons representing 17 different organizations. And it rated housing as the most prevalent cause of poverty over drug use, lack of education, cultural and language barriers, income and job insecurity, and mental health challenges. The communities that it represents include Billerica, Chelmsford, Dracut, Dunstable, Lowell, of course, Tewksbury, Tingsboro, and Westford. They looked at what the rent burdens were in these communities. And in Billerica, the percentage that renters pay above 30% of income to housing costs is just over 40% at 43%. In Chelmsford, it's at 45%. Drake, it's at 51. Dunstable, which is a smaller rural community, is at 27. Lowell's at 55, Tewksbury's at 53, and Tingsboro and Westford are at 39 and 40%, respectively. The information also goes to the percentage of total units that are rentals in a community. In Billerica, it's 20%. In Chelmsford, 16. Drake at 21. Dunstable, 3. Lowell, it's 58% of the housing stock. Tewksbury, it's 14. Tingsboro, 16, and Westford, 13. So in effect, this goes to the challenge of affordable housing that addresses, I think, zoning changes and how zoning can affect the supply of affordable housing. So the legislation that Abby just spoke about hopefully will be instrumental in addressing the shortage of housing availability. Common Ground isn't as large as Emilio's organization by any means. We're a staff of one part-time person, one full-time, and another full-time administrative assistant. So we rely on consultants to help us manage the development process, which certainly can be pretty complicated. And we go about finding opportunities either as a result of requests for proposals that communities issue through networking with housing advocates in the communities that we serve, or finding out about opportunities with brokers. Well, one of the challenges that we're beginning to look at now is homelessness, and CTI has had a long commitment on addressing homeless families and families in transition. They right now manage and own 3 shelters, and they lease a garden apartment building that provides additional shelter for a total of, amongst those properties, about 120 families. And in addition to that, they work with DHCD in finding scattered sites for rent that they provide to homeless families. And Common Ground had purchased and recently completed the rehabilitation of 29 units that it owns, everything from 1 to 2 to 3 bedroom units that provide housing for permanent housing for families in transition, supported by Massachusetts rental vouchers. So everyone is at 30% of median income or below. And we also receive a certain amount of money per unit, $1,500, to provide supportive services to those families to help them, if possible, transition out of into self-sustainability, if you will. Lowell just completed a homeless study and survey and found that some 200 people, largely individuals, are homeless in the community. And unfortunately, if you walk through downtown Lowell's Merrimack Street, the main street, you'll see evidence of it. So we're working now to look at whether or not we can develop opportunities for SROs or single person occupancy units to address that need. And that remains a significant challenge. Where do we find the money? Emilio did a great job of breaking down the sources that funded his project. But if you're interested in how DHCD prioritizes the funding that it has available, go on their website and find their qualified allocation plan. It will tell you everything you need to know about DHCD priorities, its goals, its missions, and its requirements. The other sources of assistance include CDAC, the Community Economic Development Assistance Corporation. It administers certain subordinated loan programs that can provide pre-development assistance through financing, and can offer acquisition loans. We've used something called the Property and Casualty Initiative. There's also something called the Life Initiative. Those organizations too can be used to provide acquisition financing. And of course, the other organizations are mass development and mass housing. Both can provide 4% low-income housing tax credits. The project that Emilio mentioned competed for 9% credits, which of course generate much more equity than the 4s. And they also couple those 4s with tax-exempt financing, which maybe not in this day and age with historically low interest rates can usually provide a significant spread between the tax-exempt bond and a conventional financing rate. DHCD does issue NOFAs on funding availability. Right now, there are 2 NOFAs that are outstanding. One is for projects that are deemed ready to go, and that's for deals that are 70 units or more. And they also have a community scale housing initiative NOFA that's out, and that's for units that are 20 or below, projects that are 20 below units. Their rental rounds are once a year. This year, we expect that it's 2 phases basically. This year, we expect their pre-development, their pre-applications to be due in September, with a one-stop application to be submitted in January if you're selected to go ahead. The competition is fierce. Normally, DHCD will get 3 or 3.5 to 1 funding requests for every dollar that they have available to distribute. So the time frame that Emilio mentioned for his project is one that we're all familiar with. I've been asked to tell you a little bit about a project that we're received funding for in Acton, but we began that deal in 2017 and just received the phone call from Kate Racer, God bless her, in December saying that we'd been funded. I have to say that the people who work at DHCD are champions in my mind. Kate Racer has been there for, she's an institution. And the people who work with her are really dedicated to the cause of affordable housing. And without them and without their support and guidance, I don't think any of us would be successful because this is a very, very complicated business. When you're talking about low-income housing tax credits, you're dealing with tax law and the syndication of those credits to investors. There are complicated ownership structures where the general partner's obligations are spelled out in its management of the development through construction and occupancy. And the sources all have their requirements as well. Um, just a quick minute about the Acton project that we're involved with. Amy, when was it? 2012, I think we finished the conversion of the town school, Acton Town School, to 15 units of family housing. Trust me, we're probably one of the only nonprofits that's foolish enough to do a 15-unit project, because it's as complicated as doing 150 units or the 60 that Emilio. In some ways, it's more complicated because of its size. But that deal, fortunately, in the end, was financed without debt because we were able to secure low-income housing tax credits and use state and federal historic credits, as well as the other alphabet soup of state sources to achieve the conversion of that to 15 units of family housing. And as a result of that effort, which we became aware of, by the way, through the town's issuance of a request for proposals, we developed a relationship with town officials, and particularly with the folks who serve on something called the Acton Community Housing Corporation, which was chaired by Nancy Tavernier. So sometime later, I saw that a property was for sale in Acton. So I thought I'd call Nancy to see what she thought about whether or not it would be a suitable location for a project. And she said no. She didn't think it would, but she had information about a site that is diagonally across Mass Ave from our old high school commons project. And she said that it was under agreement to a local developer who informed her that he wasn't really interested in pursuing the project anymore, and that he would assign his purchase and sale agreement to another organization. And so we met with that developer, and he did assign the agreement to us without even asking for his deposit back. So that was a real plus. The site consists of 0.89 acres. We're developing 31 one-bedroom units on the property for seniors age 62 and above. The total project cost is just over 15 million. Part of our challenge in terms of costs goes to, we found this out later, that once we'd taken over the agreement, that once upon a time, the site had been part of a larger apple orchard. So when you see the term apple orchard, make sure your antenna go up, because you're going to run into soil contamination, lead and arsenic. And of course, the levels of lead and arsenic on this site, where a single family home is located now that is vacant, exceeded reportable levels. So the message there is that real estate involves multiple disciplines, and each one of these disciplines requires investigation and due diligence and a certain level of expertise. And you know, you can be surprised even if there are best efforts. So when you're thinking about development, you have to think about how do we mitigate risks. As I said, we began that project in 2017. You know, I mentioned that we had a number of sources for this deal that DHCD is providing along with its cousin organizations. There's permanent debt, which is in the $2.3 million range. The subsidized funding, which is made up of six sources of sub-debt, including funding from the Acton Community Housing Corp, come to another 4 million. And the, excuse me, the low-income housing tax credits are generating another 8.85 million to add up to our 15 million plus project costs. We're working towards closing. The closing agenda is 17 pages. And there's a number of items that need to be checked off. But we've secured our financing commitments at this point, including from our tax credit investor. And unfortunately, as we've seen costs increase because of the effects of COVID on materials and labor costs, we were able to raise more equity than we originally projected, because we're getting 96.5 cents versus the 92 that we projected for our one-stop application. And we think that's because our market analysis shows that there is clearly demand, and obviously Acton is an attractive location. So we were fortunate to have quite a bit of interest as we shopped around with various indicators for the development. So, you know, what can communities think about? Excuse me, 40B is obviously a tool. It can be an adversarial tool, or it can be a friendly tool. It can be a way to help you develop your own priorities with, say, your own planning to develop housing production plans, which can give you a pathway to achieving your 10%. DHCD, like everyone else, likes to leverage as much money as they possibly can. So in order to make applications more competitive than others, the amount of local participation financially makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense to DHCD, I should say, and really benefits your appeal to them for financing. In Acton's case, they waived the building permit fee. They reduced the sewer connection fee. And the Acton Community Housing Corp provided $550,000 as part of that sub-debt that I mentioned. And the thing that really helped a small nonprofit like us is that Acton also participated in the pre-development costs by contributing $110,000 towards some $400,000 that we spent in order to get the project ready to proceed, meaning full plans and specs and environmental and legal and all of that business ready to go. So I guess in sum, there's clearly a need. The legislation that Senator Eldridge and others supported will make a difference. And COVID relief, I think, is providing more resources, at least for this interim period, to DHCD. And if you're interested in affordable housing, obviously the message is be patient and try to mitigate your financial risks, and look to providing the services as well that, for example, seniors will need in order to allow them to age in place if in fact senior housing is what you're interested in. So sorry, no slides, but I hope that was helpful to you all.
All right. Thanks, Steve. I think I'm next. So I will share my screen. Can everyone see that? I'm Carolyn Reed with Habitat for Humanity North Central Massachusetts, and hopefully most of you are familiar with what we do. So we seek a world where everyone has a decent place to live. And our mission is to bring people together to build homes, communities, and hope. So the way Habitat is set up, we have Habitat International, and then we're set up with this, all the same vision, all the same mission, but we have independent local affiliates. And there are 16 of us in Massachusetts, and I cover Acton through Athol. And then we have another couple that cover the rest of Jamie's territory or service area. Right now, every affiliate can choose how they meet the housing needs of their area. And what our office is doing is building 2 new houses per year and repairing up to 24. So Habitat serves people who are in 60% or less of area median income. With our homes, we generally serve 30 to 60% of AMI. And with critical home repair, we serve 60 or less. So we will go below 30% of area median income. For our new home building, generally what we build are 3-bedroom, bath and a half, 1,200 square foot homes. We design all our homes for accessibility. We make sure that they're compatible with the character of the neighborhood, because most of our homes will go into neighborhoods that have a mix of affordable and market rate housing. So we try to make sure that we're integrated with neighborhoods and there is a mix within the neighborhood. The way that we get land, it's usually donated to us. We pay up to $1 for our properties. And the properties that we've gotten, many have been through tax taking from the town. So we've worked with Acton for a few of those. We do sometimes work with builders and contractors to help them meet their requirements under inclusionary zoning or under 40B. So we've done that as well. We have acquired land through builders who no longer were interested in the land, and so they've donated it to us, and we've had individuals donate land to us. So that's how land comes. Our homes do come with a DHC deed rider. Generally, our homes are local action unit homes. Under the LIP program, we have done a couple of 40Bs, but generally they're local action unit, and they are all included on the subsidized housing inventory. So our projects, you've heard from Steve and Emilio, we do the smaller projects. So we can build our homes more quickly. We do them in about a year. With land acquisition, it can take us up to 2 years to complete a home, but the building of the home takes about a year. And we generally build with volunteer help. So when we come into a community, we do start a local project committee, and the local project committee helps us to find local volunteers and to raise funds locally as well. Our homes are funded through individual donations, grants. We do sometimes work with cities for home funds through HUD. So we do, and we have had Federal Home Loan Bank grants before as well. Our current home build projects, at least for my affiliate, we're building on Old Keene Road in Athol, and you can see the family here that was selected for the home. The families do help build their homes. They'll put in 200 to 350 hours helping to build their homes. So they're selected very early in the process as soon as we get a building permit. Tomorrow morning, we're closing on land in Hubbardston for a home build. We have a property, 26 Carlisle, that was awarded through an RFP, and that goes to town meeting on the 21st. And then we do own a property in Stowe on Sudbury Road. And we have started development there. And I'm very interested in what Abby had to say, because we have had an appeal by 2 of the abutters. And so part of the appeal has been waived, but the other one is still pending. For critical home repair, the reason we added this to what we were doing in the affordable housing realm is we realized that in Massachusetts, we have a fairly good affordable housing stock. We still need a whole lot more, but we wanted to maintain what we actually had. So we started a critical home repair program, again, to serve families and individuals earning 60% or less of area median income to stay in their homes. So we do a lot of work for aging in place. We do a whole lot of roof repair, and accessibility remodels to make sure that the existing affordable homes can be safe for families to stay in them. These are pictures of a couple of past projects. Right now, the largest we've done are duplexes. We do, because these are individual family homes, it is all a home ownership program. And the families do have mortgages, and they're 0% mortgages structured for what they can afford. So on the left, I'm showing a duplex that was built in Air on Central Ave, and Jamie was part of this. And we had two fabulous families who've moved in there. And then on the right is an example of one of the homes that we worked with Acton to build. And that was on River Street. We've since renovated a duplex on River, between River and School Street in Acton as well. So those are examples of some of the homes. Right now, we do not qualify people, obviously, before the homes, before the application is open. But right now on our notification list, we have 336 families who are waiting to apply for a home. So that just shows you the demand that there is for home ownership. Most of our affiliates have been operational for 30+ years. So my affiliate's been around for 33 years. We've completed 37 homes and 90 repairs so far. And we've talked about funding. And I'm just putting my contact information up there if anyone has questions for me. And I think, Jamie, we were going to accept questions through chat now. And I'll stop sharing my screen. I went through that real quickly.
Great. Thank you so much, Carolyn. I want to just thank all the presenters, Emilio Dorcely, Abby Kirby, Steve Jonkis, and Carolyn Reed. Really appreciate the thoughtful presentations. And you know, I know that just these projects are so detailed, they're multi-years, and you know, hopefully gives a bit of a flavor for municipal officials about, you know, how to move forward and see more affordable housing in their communities. Do you want to open it up, obviously, for the chat? If for those that are attendees, you can put in the chat questions, and I will take a look. I am just going to take the privilege as the, I guess, the state senator and organizer for tonight to ask the presenters a question. And I think it's for all four of you. Not everyone has to answer, though they're certainly welcome to. Is some of the presentations you mentioned about different steps that perhaps the town or city government took to be more welcoming, to allow for your projects to go forward. If you could just give me a view on what is the most concrete action that a town or city can take as far as government leaders to see any of your projects move forward. So anyone is welcome to be the first to answer. I
think for Habitat, at least, I think it's towns that have formed an affordable housing trust. And I think, as Steve was saying, ACHC is really a powerhouse in Acton, and they really make sure that affordable housing happens. So towns that have an affordable housing trust, it's really helpful. And towns that are looking at inclusionary zoning and different ways, 40R and 40S, and different ways to bring in affordable housing and to make it easier to get it permitted.
Thank you, Carolyn.
I would just add that I think one of the tools that the state makes available to localities to help them think through what their affordable housing needs are and the proper locations for those developments would be the housing production plans. And I know that communities in our region have worked with a regional planning agency to develop plans and which can set up goals for housing production, and to the extent that a community is making progress on those goals, they can prevent, even if they're below the 10% threshold, correct me if I'm wrong, but they can prevent someone from coming in and saying, look, I'm going to build 150 units on, this 10-acre lot, and they're all going to be, single family homes that are squashed together. And it's really going to affect your school population. It's going to affect traffic, all those things that people worry about when they basically have a NIMBY attitude, right? And I think the housing production plans can help build a consensus within a community to avoid that sort of adversarial reaction to affordable housing development.
I would add having a housing production plan that sort of gives the community choice to sort of, envision how they want their community to be. And as Stephen, talked about it, and Carolyn talked about it, that gives the community a plan to sort of know where they want what, and especially with the new law that also sort of, pushes the community a little bit to find a, reasonable sized district where they want the multifamily housing to happen. And so all of these tools together can sort of allow the community to choose where they want development to be, so that it's not forced upon them, but they can plan thoughtfully where they want what, so as to meet the needs of their residents.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and I agree with all the comments previously, is to really for the municipalities to think of this as a partnership, that it's really a partnership, whether it's with a nonprofit or other types of developers, that they're providing the mechanisms and the environment that will allow for nonprofits and other developers to be successful, but that they're actually going down this journey with them. That at the end of the day, they want to partner with these entities to try to figure out what are the best, what are the needs. And for example, the plan that was just discussed is one way to do that, but it's also to be able to have those conversations early on with folks who want to do affordable housing, and to say, this is what we believe is needed in our community based on these data and these statistics, and then to figure out how they can, work together to make sure that those needs are met.
Great, thanks everyone. Really appreciate that. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat. The first one from Carl directly to Emilio says, I often hear about the difficulty of incorporating sustainable design features into affordable housing due to higher first costs, even though the long-term benefits to residents' operating budgets and the planet are very clear to us. How much of an extra cost did passive house certification end up being for your development? And how is this justified to the funders/stakeholders?
Sure. Great question. And you are absolutely right. Over the years, it's become a little bit easier to justify the need. And I think it's because there's a general acknowledgement of two things. One is the value of the energy efficiency, not only to the environment, but equally important to the long-term sustainability of rental property. One of the biggest challenges in preserving affordable housing rental is the year in and year out cost of maintaining those properties, and energy costs tend to be the ones that are seeing the largest increases year in and year out. The second point is that the increased cost, which is about a little over 20%, and the primary reasons for those costs is that for passive housing, the key is making the building airtight. And that is achieved through one, increased insulation, and then two, the ventilation, and then three, the increased level of the, of the airtightness of the windows. And the windows are probably the highest cost. And part of that is because, again, like any new technology, currently the windows are, not all of the windows, but a significant amount of the passive house windows are not made, in the US, even though that's changing quickly. And so that increases the cost. I mean, the hope is that over time, those costs will decrease. And the second area, which is the installation, many cities and states are actually adopting higher installation standards. And so what that's been doing is decreasing the difference between meeting the code and meeting the passive house standard. And so that's actually also been a very positive thing to encourage people to look towards passive housing. But at the end of the day, it does cost more. And I think that the winning argument is not just the environment, it's because of the long-term sustainability and showing how operating costs are increasing year in and year out, and that by doing this, what you're really doing is actually helping to preserve affordable housing, and you're actually trying to take this investment, and you may be making an initial higher investment, but the idea is that that investment will be beneficial for a longer period of time and will require less future investment in order for it to be maintained.
Thank you, Emilio. Really appreciate that. Very thoughtful response. Next question is for Avi from David Martin from Acton Select Board member. Says, did I hear correctly that rezoning for duplexes is specifically not allowed for rezoning by majority vote?
So first, let me clarify the definition of multifamily. Multifamily is defined as a building with 3 or more residential dwelling units or 2 or more buildings on the same lot with more than 1 residential unit in each building. And so there are 2 things around multifamily housing. One is that simply the housing choice lowers the requirement of a supermajority to a simple majority for adopting a multifamily by right housing in an eligible location. And I have given in my presentation the definition of what eligible location is. In the 175 communities that are listed as MBTA communities, yes, there should be a reasonable size district that the community assigns in an area around transit where multifamily can be by right. So that is it's not as simple as just getting it down to removing a majority vote. It in fact is getting it down to a simple majority vote and making it by right for a particular reasonable size district in the MBTA assigned communities. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would just say someone who's spoken to yourself and Eric Shupin and Chapa, completely recognize that the administration and, organizations like Chapa are really taking a close look at, okay, what is housing choice? What is the smart growth, MBTA zoning change? What is it really going to look like and how will be implemented? So.
Yeah, and I would say that the intention there is that, and you would see these reports that there are less than, there is a whole acre around the MBTA stops where there is only 1 or 2 homes, single family homes. And so we want to make it more sustainable by making sure that people can walk to the stations and sort of, we are building housing in a way that it is more aligned with our sustainability goals and also our housing goals that the governor has put out and that we genuinely need in this state.
Thanks again. I appreciate that. Question from Rick Lefferts. What can be done to expand affordable homeownership at income levels generally paid to municipal/school employees? Bigger policy question.
I'd like to at least say that is probably one of the areas where probably everyone in this panel has given a lot of thought to, but I know at Urban Edge, we just finished our strategic planning process and we have redoubled our commitment to trying to figure out how to do more affordable home ownership. I mean, obviously, mass housing over the past few years has gotten back, let me start this way. For a number of years after the crisis of 2008, the state had kind of exited providing support for affordable home ownership. And obviously, given the impact of the crisis, we can see how some folks were shy, but it's only recently where the state has started to provide some limited funding. And even this limited funding has already been overprescribed, which means that there are more projects that want that funding than there's funding for, which is not unusual, but we haven't even scratched the surface yet. So I think that there's been a lot of advocates who have been trying to ask our elected officials, the governor, to take a look at creative ways to find more funding to create affordable home ownership, because as we know, affordable home ownership is one of the keys to building wealth and to having sustainable communities. And given the average home prices in the state of Massachusetts, it's a huge challenge for people. And sometimes people forget that affordable housing is not just about rental. It's really about a mix of both rental and home ownership. And as the senator said, this is a public policy issue.
Thanks, Emilio. Next question from Anna Houston, Littleton Planning Board, who's done some really terrific work in Littleton on affordable housing. She asked, typically, how does a nonprofit community development corporation, CDC, select the projects it will work on? Does the CDC act as the lead in these projects or another entity? So I don't know if that's directly for Emilio or Steve wants to weigh in.
Well, again, I think the way we become aware of projects is as a result of networking with affordable housing advocates. If you have an affordable housing committee in Acton, and if they were to reach out to the select board to say, look, we think this site is appropriate location for building some level of affordable housing to serve the population that Rick Lefferts mentioned, then if they could work together at that point to issue a request for proposals, if in fact it's a municipally owned piece of land, or look to whether or not sites become available that, for example, might be under 61A, that the town wants to acquire and to preserve as farmland or as open space, but is interested in seeing a portion of it developed to address housing needs. That could be an approach, especially for a community like Littleton that has a considerable amount of farmland that might be in that category. Tingsboro used its zoning and permitting ability to negotiate a deal with the Toll Brothers, whereby Toll Brothers purchased the Tingsboro Country Club, a small private course that was open to the public, where I never broke 100. But anyway, they accommodated the Toll Brothers zoning requirements for age-restricted housing for sale. But as part of the deal, Toll Brothers is allocating 2.5 acres back to the community that will be fully served with all of the utilities that would benefit the for sale portion of the deal. So our guess is that the Tingsboro will at some point be issuing an RFP to find a either for-profit or nonprofit developer to undertake a development program for that 2.5 acres. So those are just a couple of ideas, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
And similar to Steve, at Urban Edge, we respond to RFPs. We look for sites that are for sale. We work with municipal governments. And sometimes people approach us because of the work that we've done and say, would you be interested? And depending on what it is, it's something that we would do. As far as we ordinarily are capable of being in the lead, but we don't always feel like we need to be. It depends on what the type of project and our specific experience with that project, or if we are partnering. For example, Urban Edge has had long-term partnerships with a number of nonprofits where we are currently redeveloping a series of public housing units, and we've partnered with 2 other CDCs and to create a master plan where we're each doing several buildings. And we've done other projects where we've been co-developers. So it really depends on the situation and the goal and who has both the best capacity, the relationships, and the interest to be the lead. But we've done it, in multiple ways.
Yeah,
Great.
one of the just to add a quick thought that comes to mind. I mean, one of the other factors is that you're not, as a project sponsor, you're not able to have that many deals in the DHCD pipeline. So, for example, if you've got a deal that has been awarded and yet hasn't closed, and you've got another deal that you're putting in a pipeline, the fact that you haven't closed the other deal is going to affect your eligibility for funding on the second one.
And I would just add, editorial comment on that is that why, I feel strong we need to find, more dedicated revenue or just more state funding to, open up that pipeline, because I know a lot of these projects, are taking 3, 4, 5 years before the round is is granted. The last question, which makes sense also because it's almost 8:30. I want to be respectful to people's times, especially the presenters. It's a question from Laura Wagner, Marlborough City Councilor. And I will say a bit of on the policy front, dare I say, politics. How will the new Housing Choice Act prevent gentrification? 10% of affordable units per project, does not create affordable when the market rent for units is $2,400. We need more units that range between $800 and $1,400. Construction costs are very high right now, and the projects being proposed are factoring in high rents to justify rents. But before anyone comments, I'll just say I try to explain to my constituents around the zoning reform changes that happened last session as part of the economic development bill that Avi explained, is that there were certainly bills that were bolder, including some bills I filed around requiring certain some of that housing to be more affordable or a higher percentage be affordable. And there are elected officials, there are constituents that even push back against the housing choice proposal. So just want to highlight that. But for the experts, for the presenters, I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in on the actual question from Laura.
I can, and that's a loaded question, but it gets to the crux of it. I would say that, first of all, the lack of affordable housing supply in general in Massachusetts is driving a lot of housing prices up. That is definitely one of the factors. The building permits issued over decades has just been plummeting. And so that is where this problem starts in the first place. Second thing is, some communities are building a lot and putting their priorities there, but many communities are not. And that in turn puts more pressure on the other communities. And so the onus is on all of the communities to do their part and build. And that is what housing choice gets at. I would definitely acknowledge it's not the end of it. This is the start. It simply removes certain barriers. It gives certain tools to do more, but that is not the end of it. That does not solve the housing crisis. There are many more parts, and we do need to address many of those, but this is a good start. And I would definitely acknowledge that it's a really good step. But we have to go further, and that is what CHAPA will be working on as well. There was an inclusionary zoning, which we hope to be a part of the simple majority, which was not adopted, but we will be pushing for that. And as Senator Eldridge said, that there was a lot more that we would have loved to see, but this itself took us, the MBTA requirement took us 6 years, almost 3 sessions to actually get through. So we also want to take a moment and sort of be happy that this is passed, and now let's see how this rolls out. At the same time, we will be working to get more zoning changes and get more solutions out there.
Thank you so
Obviously, with the
much,
help of Senator Eldridge and the legislature.
Thank you so much. I don't know if anyone else has a comment on that. I would just add, I'm also emphasizing, especially to municipal officials, is, well, what are your public housing authorities doing? We've worked to increase the public housing authority operating subsidy. I'm sort of the lead on that in the Senate. And, but for municipal officials, what are you doing to better support your public housing authorities to build, housing that tends to be, more low income and serving a really vulnerable population. So, there's a lot to be done at the local level too. But yeah, I just thank you so much to the presenters. I also just thank you so much to the attendees for you to spend, hour and a half of your time. Really shows your commitment to affordable housing, and to Emilio Dorcely, to Abi Curve, to Steve Jonkis, and to Carolyn Reed. Really appreciate your time and dedication and just helping so many people across Massachusetts. So thanks again. This is being recorded, so we'll make it available for anyone else who missed it. For those attendees that do still have questions, feel free to email my office and we'll work to get the answers. And have a great night, everyone. Thanks again, okay? Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.